Can we start with the agenda on last meeting's minutes? Are we all agreed on them? Agreed, right. I'm moving to apologies. I should have done this before, but Councillor Freedman has COVID, and I do wish him a speedy recovery. So you've got me as well. Apologies from Councillor Adeliki. Councillor Douris is subbing for him. And Councillor Gale has had to go to another scrutiny meeting. And do we have any other apologies? No. Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? We have no declarations of interest, no public participation. I recognise you all. There's no call-ins that have been referred to us. And we'll move on to the action points from the previous meeting. I have one that hasn't been, appeared to not been communicated to me. It was basically about the staff turnover figure on the CSU. I may have missed it on emails, but you may have sent it to me.
Yeah, just we can send the accurate calculations to you.
Right, thank you very much. And now we'll move on to the draft budget proposals. Do we have any view from the portfolio holder, or will I move on to? Oops.
Mr. Chairman, before we do move on, then under action points, the Rossgate shops refurbishment, we've got the timescale. It's going to be after the Bennett's End refurbishment, but have we got a timescale as to the actual date and the scope of the works to be undertaken?
Hi, Councillor Guest. We have a loose time frame. We aim to start the works by the end of the financial year. They are currently being costed. There's some finer detail to be worked out on the costings. Then a paper will be submitted to Commercial Board for permission to proceed with the works. But the aim is to get them done and started this financial year. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's the timescale by the end of the financial year. Do we know what the scope of the works is going to be, what's going to be done?
The works comprise what we call phase 2 of the window replacements. Phase 1 is already completed, which comprised the rear windows at the back of the shop. Phase 2 will be the front of the shop. It's a bit more complex because, as you know, the shops have got curtain walling and integrated window systems, so it's a bit more involved than the back of the shop windows, so that's what's taking time. The contractor we're sort of costing as well is busy at the moment delivering Bennett Gates window replacement, so it will be scheduled into their programme in the new year.
Thank you. So have I got the right end of the stick that it's going to be the windows at the front of the shops, not the flats above the shops?
It's the windows for the flats above the shops.
Thank you. The flats above the shops. Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Now we're going to move on to the start turn. Nigel's going to basically take any questions or present on the draft budget proposals.
I think you've all heard enough from me. I've got Councillor Tyndall might want to say something.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, referring to the draft budget proposals, page 11 to 72, the amount of pages in front of you indicates how hard the team have had to work to produce this, not helped by the various machinations of what's going on elsewhere and various other impact upon our income and our expenditure. So I'm very pleased that we've actually managed to present a balanced budget for this year. I say we, as again, I congratulate the officers on doing a fantastic job, and as they have done in past years. And I would recommend the proposals in your agenda to the Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Tindall. Any questions from the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I take it to cover the specific questions on page 30 of the agenda? One relates to, where am I? Supplies and services and removals in 23-24 of one-off items. And one of the items removed is 50,000 for Armed Forces Day. Is that intended to, does that appear somewhere else in the budget, or not, are we not intending to celebrate that next year?
In terms of the council, what we've done, we've increased an events budget instead of having one-off budgets for certain things like the Armed Forces Day. So there is a growth item elsewhere in the budget, and there was last year that started that process. So they've got an overall events budget to pay for the different events that go on. I'm not entirely sure if the schedule for next year has been agreed at this moment in time. But Councillor Tindall's got his hand up.
As the councillor who's replaced the nominated person who represents the Armed Forces Covenant, I forget what the official title is, you can be assured that this is merely a moving of the budget items rather than the removal of the Armed Forces Day. As a military historian, I will absolutely fight to the bitter end. That continues.
Thank you. So I'll take that the events budget is equivalent to the sum of the parts that have been put into it.
I think it exceeds the previous parts, because we've looked to increase our events budget and increase the amount of events and the type of events that we undertake next year.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Carrying on down the same page to growth items under income. There's a 300,000 growth item under forum rental income. Is that a recharge to the council itself for the use of the forum, or is it some other item?
That is a temporary removal of the income for the forum for 24-25 while we negotiate a new tenant for the building. It's a provisional amount at this moment in time because there are ongoing plans in terms of what may happen to the forum. But at the moment, we are currently out of contract at the end of this financial year with our current tenants, who will be coming back to us in the new year on proposals for what they will or won't do, and hence we'll change the budgets accordingly.
So worst case scenario?
It is a worst case scenario.
Okay. Thank you. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, was Councillor Guest? Okay.
I'm more than happy for Councillor Durst to go first anyway.
I'm very pleased to hear what Ron Tindall has said about the Armed Forces budget, and I have to declare an interest in a sense, in that until May of this year I was the chairman of the Hertfordshire Armed Forces Covenant Board. On that basis, and bearing in mind the importance of our relationship with service people, both in active and veterans, would it be possible to ring fence that £50,000 and any subsequent inflationary increase so that it is protected? And I do understand exactly what Ron was saying about fighting to make sure that we keep it. I think if we can enshrine it as a protected item, that would actually reinforce that.
I think in terms of at the moment, an events programme is agreed every year, and we make sure we've got the budget to finance that. I can liaise with members after this to see if they want to look at compartmentalising that. From my perspective, you get greater economies of scale and greater flexibility if you keep it as one budget and agree it on an annual basis with the administration at that point in time.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 3 questions here. The first one is on paragraph 4.10, and that's the Hemel Imaginarium. What is it?
My immediate answer is you're asking the wrong person. Genuinely, it is something that will be covered in the place overview and scrutiny who will go into a lot more details. But from my perspective, it's around doing new and different things in Hemel, things like pop-up shops and things. It's about reimagining Hemel and what it's offering at the moment, and some of those are in the short-term projects that are being delivered at the moment and on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. That's the first point. The second one is on page 27, the general fund budget change analysis for 24-25. I see that it's been budgeted for an increase in commercial rents. And how can we be confident they're being set at a level so as not to price small and medium-sized enterprises out of the market in decorum?
So in terms of commercial rents, they are set by the rent contract or leasehold that we have at the point in time. And when they come up for renewal, there's a marketing process that goes through and a bidding process that goes through in terms of people bidding for those facilities. What this is an assumption on what we think the commercial rents will increase by year on year. Those assumptions have been fairly accurate in recent years. But again, we have in a bit more of a challenging economic environment. But again, our commercial property portfolio is still over 90-odd%, which we know is the exact figure. In terms of occupancy, I think there's something like 20-odd units that aren't vacant at any one point in time. So we still have high occupancy, and that's because predominantly we have lower rentals than other properties, because we like to see those neighbourhood areas full and vibrant rather than empty.
Nigel, I can clarify that we are 96.72% occupied, which means we're 3.28% unoccupied.
Thank you. Then coming on to page 40 of the reports pack, that's under Housing and Community, the Draft Capital Programme. I see item 36, the Adventure Playground Improvement Programme. I see there's nothing in there for the next 5 years at the period of the MTFS. So is that because it's deemed that no improvements are needed, or is that because the priorities lie elsewhere?
There is a review in terms of the adventure playground and what's been offered from those facilities, but also there has been some discussions around the use of SIL to invest in some of the play areas and facilities that the council has. So you'll get more details of that post this budget setting process.
Thank you. And then the last one is on fees and charges. I see that then fees and charges for pest control for dealing with rats, mice and fleas is going up by 100%, including for decorum card holders. Has it been worked out, has it been projected how much that increase would bring in, how much extra such an increase would bring in?
So we have modelled in terms of how much additional income it will bring in. I'll be perfectly honest with the committee as always, some of the additional income that will bring in next year is going to cover some of the shortfall that the service is suffering at the moment in 23-24. The reason for the 100% increase is because we've done a full review of the service and we've looked at full cost recovery of that service. And then when we came up with those estimations, we then compared them and benchmarked them to what private contractors were charging, and we still found that those rates were in the median level of terms of what other providers are charging as well. So from that perspective, we're able to create a full cost recovery model, but also being able to compete still with the private sector.
Do we have the actual figure? Have we got the figure to hand as to how much that increase would bring in?
I haven't got it exactly to hand, but I can circulate that to the group in terms of how much additional income it brings in.
If you could do, that would be appreciated, because it wouldn't be a very good policy if an increase which brought in only a small amount basically was a barrier to people getting pest control, with the result of health implications.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. I've got 5 further inquiries after this particular question. And I just wondered, Chair, whether it might be better after this particular question because my inquiries are from page 29 through to page 43. And I think it might be better if we could, I don't know if we could do things page by page, because people might have inquiries further down the list as a proposal. Shall I? Okay. Right, so I'll take you first to page 19, 10.4, fifth bullet point, £6 million for place shaping acquisitions. I just would like a bit more information on that.
So that is a combination of two things. It is proposed investment in buying additional land as part of Market Square to allow us to fully utilise that site. And it's for acquisition of land to produce a new SANG. So that's a scientific area of natural green space that we're required to do to be able to support our future planning developments. Both of those are, at the moment, projections and concepts, but again, they haven't sought final approval from members, but would do if those were to proceed.
Thank you. I want to take you now to page 29. Just bear with me. 26. Okay, so on page 29, growth items, lines 1 to 6. You've got 756,000. Is this staff pay and conditions? So the growth items, lines 1 to 6.
Yeah.
Is that not just pay, but that's also
No.
terms as well?
So it is growth in the digital team and in the HR team.
Yeah.
And a removal of savings around the customer strategy that were unrealised this year. That covers, I think, 600,000 of it. So from that perspective, we need to deliver the digital strategy and we need to improve in terms of what we're doing from a digital perspective. And that requires investment in the team. So it's simple as man. I believe the digital strategy has been to Cabinet and was approved. So again, that's just following up on that process. I can see Aidan, for those of you that can't see, nodding vigorously. And again, the HR restructure, EDI and the organisational development manager post are seen as absolutely fundamental to support the recruitment and retention that the council is going through at the moment. None of that is related to changing terms and conditions or additional pay. It is about growth in the services to support corporate strategies.
Thank you. Then I want to go to page 39, line 16. Thanks for bearing with me. Come to that.
Is that Broadwater
It's
Road
about,
resurfacing?
Broadwater Road. I just wonder, I mean, I don't know where Broadwater Road is, it's certainly not in Bennett's End, but I just wonder why DBC are resurfacing Broadwater Road and not Herts County Council.
I am going to open up to see if either Richard Weiss or Ben Hosier have any knowledge of that project.
From memory, Broadwater Road is in Berkhamsted, near Canal Fields. It runs along the front of the Berkhamsted Raiders Football Club. There has been traditionally budget in there to resurface that. From memory, an exercise was carried out that some of it, but not all of that charge, could be recovered from some of the residents, but there isn't actually any powers the council has to enforce that. It's more if the residents want to buy into paying for the resurfacing of the road, but ultimately the feeling was the council may have to bite the full bullet on that one.
So just for you're entirely right in terms of Council Hanwell, in that the majority of highways are a Herts County Council domain, but there are elements of land that we own, or highways, tiny little elements normally at the forefront or around some of our properties that we do own and often would go through the resurfacing. And I think Councillor Garrick Stevens is probably going to be able to offer a little bit more background on this.
Thank you. The road, in fact, is in Canal Fields, and the ownership of this road has been very contentious, and the repair to the road
has been demanded by the local sports clubs, etc., because it's in very poor shape and it gets flooded, etc. And it has been finally agreed that it will be resurfaced.
I'm a new boy, Chair, so I'm just kind of trying to find what the rules are, really. I mean, it seems like it would have been what my dad would have called an unincorporated road or something like that. I've got a further one on page 39. It's regarding Hemel Hempstead Sports Centre. Should Hemel Hempstead Sports Centre have not paid for the AstroTurf rather than Dacorum Borough Council? It's £530,000.
We own the Hemel Hempstead Sports Centre.
Well, that's a very good answer there, isn't it? Page 40, verge hardening, line 28. Oh, I might be wrong there. I think I might need to go up one.
Nope, get verge hardening,
Okay.
number 38.
Yeah.
That programme will have a paper coming back to members, I think early in the next calendar year, in terms of the proposals going forward for verge hardening and some of the ecological improvements that have been done. So we'll get a better understanding of how that money is going to get spent. At the moment, what that is a roll forward of previous year's budgets for the verge hardening programme. So you'll get a better understanding when that paper comes back to members later in the year.
Yeah, my question was just going to be, is that it looks like it's quite high given the fact that normal figure is around 250k and this year it's 700.
It's a combination of some works that have been delayed and some decisions that haven't been made, given we've had a new administration coming in May. They're having to review all of the capital programme in terms of what they want to do going forward. So again, that will come through with a lot more detail to members in terms of exactly what's planned in the short and medium term.
Thank you. Appendix G, page 43. Strangely named multifunctional devices, £90,000. Just wondered what that was.
Printers.
Printers. Could it not just say printers?
They do more than printing.
Oh, are they? So printers, photocopiers, printers.
Yeah,
that do
it's the device
other than
that's multifunctional. It does printing, scanning, and photocopying.
Multifunctional devices does seem like they could be quite sinister pieces of equipment, but now you've actually taken all of that theatre away. So thanks very much. Do you know what? I think that's the end of the Pete Hannell show. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannell. Do never be afraid to ask as many questions as you want, because you are new to this and there's a lot of new people here. So thank you for your questions. Have we any more questions? Yeah. Well, Councillor Williams.
Just out of interest, there's obviously a whole massive range of charges here, all subject to review. But the one for green bin, the change to green bin charges is actually signalled up as subject to final review. So what's different about the final review of that charge as opposed to the final review of all the other hundreds of charges on it?
We were looking at it in terms of what the government's final allocation to the local authority is on the 19th of December. If it's as we expect, then that £5 will stay. If the government actually give us nothing or actually take money away from us, then that might be one of those that has to be reviewed in terms of replacing money that the government has taken from us.
All right. Unusual approach.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, I take it we can recommend the support to Cabinet. Thank you. Item 8, the Menopause Policy. I'll leave it over to Matt to take that one.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time tonight to be able to take you through this. The menopause policy itself is obviously set out in Appendix 1, but I'd like just to give you some kind of background and introduction to the paper, if I may. So menopause in the workplace is currently a high profile topic of discussion. There's been many increases or an increase in cases where individuals are taking claims of discrimination to employment tribunals due to lack of support and awareness of menopause in their workplace. A recent survey showed that 1 in 10 women who've worked whilst going through menopause have had to leave their job directly because they weren't supported in the appropriate way. The council actually has around 250 women over the age of 40, so this is a significant number of around 1/3 of our workforce. So it just shows you the impact that if we manage this correctly, that we can really support a significant chunk of the workforce in terms of understanding and educating people in the right way of how to treat people appropriately who are going through menopause. So the purpose of this policy is to educate and provide clarity to staff and managers to remove the taboo associated with the menopause and normalising it within the workplace. It will confirm and support, it confirms the support available for the council, including suitable reasonable adjustments that managers should be considering, the expected training, which would be a mandatory training for all managers to undertake, but there will also be workshops for staff who are going through this. We have been working with the voluntary sector, mainly through DENS, to set up a work group and a support group that council officers can use along with voluntary sector employees, and we will be arranging speakers and certain support groups for our staff and for their staff. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to read through, but really tonight it's an opportunity to give me any feedback on the policy so that we can take it forward to the next steps, which will be Cabinet in January. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Councillor Santamaria.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say I'm encouraged by the fact that this has been presented. It's really good to see, and I think puts us in the right direction in terms of looking at discrimination issues in a more proactive way. I was just wondering, what will be the kind of, will it be reviewed after a year, say, to see how it's going? Will there be room for adjustments if they're needed?
Yeah, like all employment policies, there's a 3-year formal review stage, but it is prudent that we make sure that 1, the training's right, 2, that we are not receiving any complaints through any grievances or anything that we hear from an HR perspective. So there will be on the ground monitoring to make sure there's success, but also who's attending workshops, who's attending the training. So those things will be monitored. And if we feel that there needs to be additions to the policy, then there are opportunities for us to do that during the 3-year period.
If I could just add, without obviously wanting to breach anyone's confidentiality, it would be useful to have updates perhaps on how that goes.
Councillor Douris.
Thank you. I think this is entirely right and proper, and certainly from our side we would support this completely.
Any more questions or clarifications required? And I totally agree with both councillors. This is a very important policy, and it should go forward as recommendations in the paper. So thank you. Okay. Next, item number 9, parking service tariff and business case proposals.
Thank you, Chair. This committee will be aware that a report was presented to this committee back in September on the proposal to informally consult with residents and businesses on the proposed changes to parking policy, which included tariffs and charging policy. That was also presented to Cabinet in the same month, where a decision was made to commence with the informal consultation. It was agreed at September Cabinet that Cabinet would take a further decision on the proposals after consideration of the responses to the informal consultation. Final proposals would then need to be put out for statutory consultation that must take place before a formal traffic regulation order can be agreed and implemented. The purpose of this report today is to update this committee on the informal consultation recently undertaken for parking tariff proposals and the proposed next steps. I would like to bring to this committee's attention section 2.3 of the report, which clearly sets out the responses received to the informal consultation, and also appendix 2, which also shows the responses in draft form. And finally, I would like to bring to the attention of committee the indicative timeline as shown in section 2.4 of the report and the proposed parking charges that are shown in appendix 1 and will be included as part of the statutory consultation should Cabinet agree to proceed with the next steps of this approach. I'm happy to open up the floor for any questions concerning the informal consultation response.
Thank you, Chair. Not to put too fine a point, I think the informal consultation was pointless, more put in place to overcome the poor way in which it was introduced and probably try and preserve the former portfolio holder's position in Cabinet, which clearly didn't succeed either. Without the, and I did ask when we went to informal consultation, if the tariffs or suggested tariffs would be available for the consultation, and they weren't. And for anybody who tried to complete the consultation with half a dozen questions without actually seeing the implications of the changes, it was almost impossible to understand just how swinging some of the increases are. With the benefit of the tariff changes, you can see that, you know, taking an example of Water Garden South, the minimum charge is going to rise from 60p to £2.30, so an increase of nearly 300%. And if you want to stop in Berkhamsted High Street for 10 minutes to buy a cup of coffee, the increase in the charge for doing so was 900%. Because what wasn't clear in the consultation, or what was hidden in the consultation, is that the 12-minute increments are being removed. So instead of paying 20 pence per 12 minutes, you've got to pay £2 to stop for 2 minutes. So say from 20p to £2 is a 900% increase. You know, in High Street in Hemel Hempstead, the increase is going from 50 pence to a minimum £1.20 or £1.10, so an increase of 120%. So the sort of scale of the size of the increases, because people wouldn't have understood what 28% plus a minimum 2 hours meant in terms of how it was going to affect some of the visits to the car parks. And then to introduce on-street car parking charges of £2 an hour in somewhere like Hemel Old Town, which is already struggling in terms of daytime trade. And then to increase on-street charges from their current 8 AM to 6 PM, from 7 AM to 10 PM, significant effect upon nighttime trade. What I would like to ask is if there is a breakdown, because I think these are swinging increases, a breakdown of what is anticipated to be brought in income terms by every aspect of these increases. So, you know, what's expected to come in from the introduction of on-street charges where they don't currently exist, what would be expected to come in from the increase in on-street charges where they do currently exist, and what's the anticipated income from changes within car parks themselves, and also what rationale there is for the only change that's not suggested here, which is the resident CPZ permits. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. I see on page 121 of the reports pack that only about 3% of respondents were businesses. So I'd like to ask which businesses were consulted.
So the consultation was open to all residents and all businesses. It was, the council used their new consultation platform, and I'm fully aware that the council also were marketing and advertising the fact that the consultation was open. We do have the names of everyone that submitted a response to the consultation, but no one was actually, you know, we didn't physically go out and knock on doors and invite any of the businesses. So I don't think anyone specifically was targeted. It was across the whole of the council.
When you come to the formal consultation, will there be a more targeted way in which the businesses in the Marlows can be consulted with, and those in the north end of the Marlows, where all the takeaways are, where a lot of people stop of an evening, particularly of a Saturday evening, to get a takeaway, and having to pay £2 to stop for a few minutes to get a takeaway could put a lot of customers off, which could have an adverse effect on the businesses.
So in terms of the statutory consultation, there's a laid down process that the council must comply with while following that statutory consultation process. Again, it will not target individual businesses or residents, but it will be a laid down set procedure how we must undertake that consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Councillor Davis.
An observation which you may find amusing, it's not. If you look at question 4C, page 119, my attention brings to the word tend, because 77% of respondents disagreed with it. I thought it was amusing to see the word tend to disagree, and 77% disagree. I don't know how you can actually dress that up to being just a tend to disagree, but we'll leave that where it is. My question to you is, what's the cost of transferring or changing all the parking charges for the machines?
I don't have that information to hand. I can certainly come back and report that. It's the cost of all of the consultation and any subsequent changes are all part of the business case forward for this, but I don't have it to hand.
So would the costs of all of that process be contained within the savings? Or would they be, in other words, would they be part of the savings, or would they be separate items?
So there's no saving, it's an income generation contract in terms of proposal. So it would be generating income for the council. The cost to implement those changes as part of the traffic regulation impact are relatively small compared to the level of income that the market increases in the charging policy will
Just got a bit of additional numbers to that. So these policy proposals will provide an additional £660,000 per year for additional income. The cost of implementing it, will come back with the exact number. It's something like 10% of the income that will be collected. So it's insignificant.
I hear what you say. It depends whether you're talking about 10% of 1 year's income or 10% of
10% of 1 year's income.
It would be helpful to see the figures.
I can certainly come back to this committee with the costs and also with the projections for each of the approaches that have been proposed.
Thank you. Any more questions?
If there are no more questions, I thought I might like to respond to some of the points made, if you wish.
Just be brief.
First of all, it was interesting that Councillor Guest referred to the fact that only 3% of businesses or 3 businesses responded, and this tended to actually reject Councillor Williams' comments on the effects on business, because if the effects were to be larger, then one would assume that businesses in general would have risen up completely rather than just 3 of them, 3%. Having assumed responsibility for this function partway through the process, we found that there's actually still no overall strategy on pricing or of any sensible way of addressing the parking structure. It's evolved quite topsy. And the officers have done a fantastic job, but it's still a laborious function, and that's why we're turning to smart metering. And it's hopeful that the next time parking is reviewed in a year or two or whenever, it means we will have the data available for the smart metering, plus the fact that there will be by then an overall strategy developed that will actually make it equal across the borough as to what is charged for what. And so therefore we won't have these various hotspots. For instance, King's Langley still has free car parking. We felt that we didn't want to mess about with that too much, although we did have one resident, I believe, who responded saying that she would like charging introduced into the car parks because they were always full. And that might mean she could get a space halfway through the day. So it's interesting how different people view it in different ways. So I hope that's helpful. Also, it's interesting to note that the 77% respondents who disagreed were still a very small percentage of the overall respondents that residents of before.
Just make a comment, Councillor Tyndall, on Councillor Guest's 3%, wasn't it? Most of these are changed, and probably the managers don't really what too much to do to bother responding. I suppose it was independent, we would probably be more keen to respond. So the statistics and everything else, as we can talk about. And Councillor Williams.
Just in response to that, Chair, I think now that the scale of the increases are actually, no one could work it out for the consultation. You have to be an expert on car parking to understand what the consultation is. Now the scale of this is there, and the potential effect upon some of our business areas, you can expect a lot more response in the next consultation.
Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Douras.
I just wonder, hearing Tyndall's comment regarding the resident of King's Langley, said the resident would like charging in the car park. I'm not quite sure whether that's charging to park or electric vehicle charging, and maybe the resident didn't make that clear.
Can always rely on you. Anyway, that's all the questions. Thank you very much. We'll, the last item. Moving on to the work programme on item 10. Any additions? Thank you.
I believe the January scrutiny is supposed to postpone that. Is that correct? So just to give members a heads up, we will confirm whether that's going to happen or not. That is not something new. The January scrutiny is often cancelled. As you will note, the report deadline is the 28th of December, which means from an officer perspective, we need to get them in by the 23rd, which is 2 weeks' time, and it generally means that the agenda ends up being very light.
Well, thank you. And this is the last scrutiny before the new year, so I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. The meeting is now closed. Thank you for your attendance.